Um, I'll go through a few things about the accountancy major, and then if you have any questions as I go through it, just raise your hand and say stop, I don't understand what you're saying, or anything like that. So that's fine, and then I'll try to save some time for questions too. What I want to talk about is a little bit of what the accounting program tries to accomplish, how we're ranked in the country, what some of the career opportunities are, and then a little bit about just what it means to be an accountant or what types of things we're trying to accomplish, and then finish it off with just a little bit about what the 150-hour requirement is. Sometimes that's tossed around. Sometimes people talk about a 5-year degree, just like architecture. Well, it's not a 5-year degree. You can get a master's degree, but the requirement to sit for the CPA exam is in terms of hours, and that varies state by state. Okay, so we'll talk just a little bit about that. Okay, so the mission of the department or the major is to offer a high-quality program that educates a national student body for careers in professional accounting, for careers that involve accounting, and for graduate study. So when we're thinking about careers, we aren't just talking about the first 3 years out of the program or just what you need to pass the CPA exam. We're thinking in terms of what types of skills do you need for the next 50 years. Okay, so in any career that would involve something related to accounting. And then when we think about graduate study, that could be law school, it could be Masters of Accountancy programs. Sometimes it's something completely outside of accounting. Sometimes people will go into medicine after being in accounting. They decide accounting's not for me, so they shift over to science. So we're trying to prepare you for kind of broad careers. Okay? And then the curriculum is going to emphasize some general skills as well as the accounting skills. So the types of general skills that we're looking at is communication. That's important in order to be able to write and then also be able to speak effectively. But I think the big thing that accounting offers is critical thinking and problem solving. And problem solving, not just can you calculate the answer, can you do an algebra problem, but it's more like, can you decide what information is important? And when you're looking at financial statements or you're looking at all this information, how do you identify the 2 or 3 pieces that are important, and then you weigh which ones are most accurate, which ones are most reliable. And so you carry that through all your decision making, not just accounting. So we kind of hone your skills based on problems that are germane to accounting, but then as you work in practice, you always bring that kind of critical eye to any decision that you're trying to make. Okay? And so we're trying to build a variety of skills. And then specifically what accounting deals with is measurement. We're trying to measure the wealth of a company and then income of a company, either for tax purposes or for financial accounting purposes. And then we're going to analyze that information. And then one specific field of accounting, auditing, is going to try to validate that information. And so we'll talk about a little bit more about what each of those represent. We're ranked very highly. We're consistently in the top 5 of Business Week rankings and this ranking from the Public Accounting Report. The MSA program is ranked very highly too. So we're consistently in the top 5 in both of those rankings. Now, why accounting? A lot of concepts, business concepts that you run into are tied to accounting definitions. So anything that you want to do in business, you have to understand something about financial statements, whether you have income, what's an asset versus what's an expense. And so it's very difficult to manage for-profit business or not-for-profit business if you don't understand that basic terminology, and then also how things relate. Okay? So accounting is really, the way I think about it, it's a lot like a foreign language with a heavy dose of algebra. Okay? So you have to understand how the different concepts fit together. And when does something have a very specific meaning versus when is it just some general vocabulary, okay? And that just comes with a lot of practice and years of experience. Again, we're emphasizing just the ability to solve problems in general, not just accounting problems, but it could be a human resource problem later on, just a way of identify what the actual issue is and then what information you need to solve it. Flexible lifestyle, most of the firms have that you would go to work for initially has thought about work-life balance, and early on in most jobs you can get control of your schedule, not that the work goes away, but you can start controlling when you do it, okay? And a lot of businesses you're forced to be, at a computer or at a job like 8 to 5 or 8 to 12 or whatever it is. But I think with accounting, a lot of times you can shift when you do the work and also even going to like more of a flex time schedule if you need to at some point later on in your career. It's always weird to say it's an exciting time for accounting because you don't think of accounting being exciting, but with the financial crisis, we saw the importance of accounting and whether the liabilities or whether the investments were really assets on firms' books. So there's a lot of regulation coming out after the financial crisis and then also trying to figure out just what happened during the financial crisis. And accountants are heavily involved in trying to figure out just what is the right way to account for some of these loans. What types of disclosure could have prevented the meltdown that we saw, okay? And so that's going on right now. Also, there are a lot of changes going on because of international standards. We're trying to become more global in what the regulations are related to disclosure and the accounting. And so the U.S. rules are moving more towards commonality with the international standards, even though we haven't adopted them yet. And finally, because of all the deficits that are being run up around the world, taxes have really coming into play. And so the big trick will be how to tax people without them knowing that their taxes have been raised, okay? So, but somehow governments are going to have to raise money. And so accountants are going to be the ones that are helping with that type of analysis, a combination of economists and accountants. Great placement rates. We have a lot of people placed right after the undergraduate program because they can get the 150 hours to sit for the exam in just 4 years. But then we also have great placement for the MSA students, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. We're a national recruiting school, so that means you aren't limited to just working in Chicago, that if you want to work in New York, firms are happy to refer you to New York. Actually, there's a lot of opportunity in New York, a lot of opportunity in San Francisco or Los Angeles, any of the financial centers. So most of our students will go to Illinois, like 30 to 40%, maybe not even that high, 30% go to Illinois, and then maybe 15 to 20% go to New York, 15 to 20% go to California, and then after that they're all over the country. Yeah, so if you want to work just about anywhere in the country, the firms will refer you to there. So we're one of the few schools that can place people anywhere in the country. And then the last thing is just we have great faculty. The professors in the College of Business are some of the best professors in the university, and then within accounting, we have some of the best professors within the college. What might you do? Most of our students go to public accounting initially, but that doesn't mean you have to go there or that you have to stay there. The types of work that people do in public accounting, it's auditing, tax. So auditing is where you would validate firms' financial statements, the financial statements that investors look at and that banks look at. Transaction services, that could be mergers and acquisitions to help with that accounting. Forensic accounting, that's essentially looking for fraud, so a specialized form of auditing. And then what I mean by industry is that rather than auditing, say, General Motors or auditing IBM, you're actually preparing the financial statements for IBM, or you're actually working in the tax department for IBM. So that's what I mean by industry. And then not-for-profit entities. Not-for-profit entities need strong accounting, like Notre Dame, the Chicago Art Institute, Chicago Symphony, that the revenue is going to be donations coming in, but then you have to keep track of their expenses. So even if you're not-for-profit, you still have to stay in business. Okay, so accounting's important whether you're working for a for-profit company or a not-for-profit company. You have some of the same concepts. Consulting, this could be management consulting or installation of accounting systems or information systems. A lot of students will go to law school after being an accounting major. Again, kind of the logic that you get out of the accounting major. And then the last thing I want to mention is academics. There's a severe shortage of accounting PhDs in the country. And so if you like accounting, if you like the theory, if you like solving the problems, you've got a strong math background in order to do statistics, which you would need for the PhD program, you should really think about a career as a professor. The median age in our accounting department is about 60. Okay, so there's a lot of opportunity there, and we aren't unique. That's the way a lot of accounting departments are around the country. So if you want a lot of control over your time and a very nice lifestyle, if you like being a student, you would like being a professor. Okay, so so think about that or keep that in the back of your mind as a great career. Now, what are some examples of what people are doing? So these are some of the titles that you see. These are all leadership positions. So I think it's easy to think, well, if I become an accountant, I'm going to be stuck at some type of low-level job. That's not the case. Especially at Notre Dame, what we're always looking for is the next leader. So you see that people are in charge of or have high-level positions at companies. These would be in industry or in public accounting. A couple of things that you'll notice that people are working for not-for-profits, either here or in Chicago. The other thing I'll mention is we have a couple accounting professors or law professors that were students here and are now teaching in the accounting department. And then one last thing, Burke America, he was a student, one of my students from the mid-90s, and he went to work for a public accounting firm initially and actually helped start a tax assistance program in Chicago, modeled off of after one that we have here. And so what the tax assistance program does is help people that don't make very much money file their taxes, and there are a lot of provisions in the tax code to actually help people get money back, but they don't know how to file the taxes, so they actually receive money rather than pay taxes. And so he actually helped start that in Chicago, and he was just named one of the 6 Chicagoans of the year this past year. But he now owns a private equity firm. But he started off as an accountant and started off in, I don't even think he was a tax accountant, but he started the tax assistance program in Chicago. So there's a lot of things you can do with accounting degree, both I guess, to have a career, but you can also do a lot to serve the public. Just an idea of what the salaries look like. The $55,000 is like a Chicago salary. The salaries vary by city. So generally, this is what you would start out at if you're ready to take the CPA exam, meaning you've got 150 hours and could sit based on that state. So each state has its own requirements regarding how many hours you need, and then how much accounting you need of that. If you've been with a firm 4 or 5 years, again, this would be like a Big Four salary. You'd be making around $100,000, and then a new partner is around $350,000, and then an average partner $750,000. Now, if you're a leader in industry, you're probably going to be making more than that. But again, money is not the only measure of your worth or anything, but it gives you an idea of what an accountant might make if you stay in public accounting. But probably the more valuable thing is the training that you get as you're moving along your career, whether you're in public accounting or whether you're in industry. You just get better at solving problems and thinking through things. Here's a little bit of the placement that we've had over the last few years. So you can see that a lot of our undergrads go right out to work. We're one of the few schools that firms are really willing to hire our undergrads because they do so well. And so many students come in with AP credit that they're close to 150 hours, even though the degree is only 126 hours. And so a lot of times firms will hire people right out of school as undergrads. So you can see a lot of people going to public accounting up here, and then there's the industry that I was talking about. And then you see a few people, a lot of people go to graduate school too, more so than any of the other majors. They'll go to either law school or to an MS in accountancy program. And you can see how things have changed over the last few years. Last year, we had probably more people go out after 4 years than we have in the prior few years, and part of that was right after the financial crisis. A lot of people didn't want to take any chances once they had a job offer. So they said, okay, if they're willing to hire me now, I'll go out. And a lot of these stats are on the card that, did you hand out the card? I gave it to you. A lot of these are on a card that you'll get in a minute, a little information card. Okay, these are the required courses that you have to take beyond the sophomore level financial courses. And so rather than describing each one, I'll try to describe what the curriculum does in the context of a newer product, the iPhone. Okay. So first we'll kind of think about the tax implications of this. How many of you have worked and received like a W-2 at the end of the year that shows how much income you've had? Okay, so you understand something about tax, what's taxable income. Okay, so there are different rules that qualifies as income, and then you pay tax based on those rules. Well, imagine a company like Apple. They've got the same issue. They've got to pay taxes too, but now it's not just income. It's not just revenue coming in, but you have to decide what can they deduct against that revenue? What would be expenses that they could deduct? What's a legitimate expense? What types of costs would be held up and then matched with the actual phone when they sell it? Okay? And it's not just federal taxes now, it's state taxes. And then it's international agreements. What about with they produce their goods in China or some other countries, sell goods in China, but they're also selling them in Europe, they're also selling them here. So you've got to keep track of what the tax rules are in all of those countries. Okay? Some countries have value-added tax, others don't. Okay, and so what the firm is trying to do is locate their businesses in order to minimize their taxes, given that they want to make some revenue. Okay, so it gives you an idea of that accounting is not just memorization, or it's just not just filling out your tax return. Once you get into a more complicated business, a global business, there are a lot of issues that you have to do for tax planning. And you may do some tax returns early in your career, but then after that, it's a lot of planning. So a lot of tax is more like legal research and law. So you'll see a lot of lawyers that do tax work. Okay, so you've got an idea that, so part of what you're doing with tax is learning what the rules are for determining what's revenue, what's an expense, and then when is it going to be taxed. Okay, and the goal of the government then is to raise money to support its operations, but then also to influence behavior. So they might give credits to hire certain types of people, or they might give credits to invest in equipment. Okay, so there are all kinds of things that affect the tax code. It's not just about getting at economic wealth. Now, Apple also has to produce financial statements for investors and for any creditors that they would have, banks. Now, those financial statements are trying to get at economic wealth. And so they take into consideration what revenue came in during the year, like when they sell these phones through AT&T or Verizon, but then also what the expenses are. You have to think about, well, if I'm making an investment in research and development, should that be expensed right away? Or is that an asset to us? And if it's an asset, how would you value it? You look at the contracts that they have with AT&T, you look at the contracts they have with Verizon. You have to think about, well, how do we value those contracts? Does Apple have a liability? Does it owe Verizon something? If it gets cash up front, should that be recognized as income, like on your tax return now? Or should some of that be deferred so that we can because we still have an obligation, you have to recognize it in future periods. So financial accounting, we have a couple of courses on that. It's really getting at what are the different things that affect the wealth of a firm and changes in that wealth. So changes in the wealth are like income. Okay? Okay. Now, some other courses deal with, and let me mention auditing. So auditing, the auditing course is that people within Apple would produce financial statements, and then the auditors would come in and validate that the presentation is accurate. Okay, so there are techniques, you don't look at every transaction, so there's techniques that you learn in order to how to sample transactions and then also look at controls. Okay, now if you think about Apple in both from a tax standpoint and a financial reporting standpoint, the transactions and contracts are very complicated. And that's what makes accounting interesting. You know, if it was just about going to a grocery store and saying, okay, we bought a gallon of milk, so that must be revenue. How much did it cost us? Okay, we're done. And that's not very interesting. You know, what's interesting about accounting is that as businesses develop new transactions, you've got to figure out how to measure the economics of those transactions. And sometimes it's not always clear. You can get arguments between accountants about what the right approach is. Okay? And that's what we try to teach you, is to think about what are the trade-offs in trying to measure an economic event. Okay? Okay. And then finally, internally, we have some management accounting courses. So that's where you get into budgeting and forecasting. So how do I decide whether to invest in a company in the U.S. or plant and equipment in the U.S. versus locating it in Vietnam? Or how do I decide on whether to open up a sales office in Europe? You know, so those are types of analyses that you would get out of managerial accounting. And we have a class that's also deals with specifically with making decisions under uncertainty. So how to use statistics in order to make better decisions about forecasting and then also valuing. Okay? But when you look at any product like an iPhone, in order to produce something like this, you need sophisticated accounting systems, both from a tax and just from a operational system, in order to get from the design of something like this to the final user. And so you've got accountants involved all the way along. Okay? Okay, and then just one more thing about the 150-hour requirement. I've already mentioned this a little bit. Most states now require 150 hours to be a CPA, but each state varies on how much accounting you need. So we have a very good advisor, Jamie O'Brien, that when you tell him what state you want to sit in, he can help you with what education requirements you're going to need. And a lot of times, as I mentioned before, students will meet the 150 hours for, especially from Illinois recently, while they're here. And so sometimes all they need are hours, other times they may need one additional accounting class besides what we require. But it differs state by state. And then the other option that we have is, or here are some of the options here. We have the AP credits, summer school, overloads, there are online courses, a lot of different ways for you to get up to the 150. But then also we have an MSA program that you could start either in January or September or August. And it's a one-year program, and generally people are hitting the 150 sometime during the MSA program. It helps you kind of see how things fit together, even if you're close to the 150. But most of the time, the students are taking the CPA exam while they're here in the MSA program, and so when they go out to work, they've got the CPA behind them, okay? Or they're getting it finished like the summer before. Sometimes the undergrads will get it. They may just not get it quite as soon as if you've gone through the MSA program. Yeah? It depends on the state, which ones are specific to accounting. So generally states will say you need, say, 30 hours of accounting, a certain amount of business, and then after that it can be anything. So that's why a lot of times the AP courses that you took in high school actually would count towards your credit on the CPA exam, sometimes even if they didn't count here. Yeah, so that's why our students here are a little bit unique because they come in with so much AP credit that it's much easier for our students to hit the 150 in total hours than a lot of students around the country. And so what you're after primarily is, do you have the accounting and business that you need? And that's all I have. I can go back to any slides, or I'll take any questions that you have. Doug, did you want to ask me anything, or did I not cover anything? Did I not cover something? I'd have to sit for the CPA exam again, so once you pass the exam, you're set. Now, where you can run into problems sometimes is they have different experience requirements to get your license, and then some states will have like different education requirements, and so they might look back and say, like say you're moving to Texas, they say, have you taken an ethics course or not? Accounting, ethics and accounting. And so before you would be able to become a CPA, you might have to take an ethics course. So, but there are agreements between states, and since we produce students for just about any state, we try to help you with what you might need going out. But then once you actually have sat for the exam in that state, then it's usually looking at experience requirements more than anything. But you don't have to take the CPA exam. Once you take it, you're done. Yeah.
Once you leave school and enter the accounting workforce, how are you able to move up the ladder to become a manager or partner as a CPA?
If you're in a public accounting firm, there's kind of a natural progression. So you get reviewed after every job. And so like the standard structure in an accounting firm is you have like a new assistant, and then you have a senior that's above you, a manager is above the senior, and then a partner is above the manager. And so there's kind of a natural time at each stage. So there's usually you're like as an assistant 2 or 3 years, and then you're a senior for 2 or 3 years, and then a manager probably like 6 years, and then if you stay, you'd be a partner. But at each stage, sometimes you say, I really like what I'm doing, but there are opportunities outside. So there are opportunities in industry. People are trying to hire you for your knowledge. You know, each year you just stay in public accounting, you learn that much more. Once you hit manager, you're really like setting up budgets and learning essentially how to manage a business or how to run a business. And so like in 6 years, you've learned an awful lot. And so a lot of people say the end of 6 years, do I want this as a career, or do I want to do something else? Do I want to start my own business? Do I want to go to work in industry, or what? So I'd say that if you're in public accounting, there's a natural progression, I'd say, within the first 12 years. And then sometimes if you aren't doing well, the firm will tell you you aren't doing well, and so there's kind of a mutual understanding that you go out. It's just you aren't getting raises like you want. If you're working for a company like IBM or GE, it's very, very specific to the company and then what program you're in. So there might be a natural rotation. So you would go through like external reporting, you might go through budgeting, you might take a stint in Chicago and then a stint in London. So it really varies by the type of firm what you would do, like if you're working for GE versus Procter & Gamble. But the public accounting is you have a pretty good idea what you're going to do, whether you're with a large firm or a little bit smaller firm like Crowe Horwath or McGladrey or BDO. Yeah.
So let's say you've got 150 hours after first semester, junior year. Would students start the MSA second semester, and then would that like overlap into the summer, and then take the CPA exam at some time while you're doing the MSA? How does that timeline work?
Right. So like let's say you can graduate at the end of December. So like instead of graduating in May, you would graduate in December. If you got enough hours, remember you wouldn't need the 150, then you would just need like the 126 at that point to graduate. So you could graduate then, start the master's program in the spring, and you might hit the 150 during that spring. So you could sit for the CPA exam some during the summer, and then finish off the MSA program in the fall, and then start work probably in January, is how it would work. And a lot of times, if you start in January, you would probably have an internship with a firm during the summer, and then you'd go back and work for that same firm in January. So there are a lot of different ways that students will do it.
Do you get, added advantage from doing the MSA, or like the salary?
The salary is not much different because they're primarily looking, are you CPA ready? And then also, whether you're a master's student or you're undergraduate, you still don't have any experience. So they're looking at kind of your experience level. But generally, the people that have come with a master's, they get the CPA done faster, more quickly. And then also, they know how things fit together better than undergraduates are going to. But it's still kind of up to you how fast you move in the firm. So as they give you opportunities, it's up to you to show that you can do that. But some types of activities, like if you're in transaction services and certain tax practices, you pretty much need a master's in order to get hired. Yeah.
Are most kids like intern in their junior year and then having those kind of jobs?
It depends on how your hours are. If you think that you're going to stay for a fifth year, typically you'll do the internship during or between your senior year and the master's year. And you might have like a week-long or 2-week leadership program during your junior year or sophomore year. If it looks like you're going to have the 150 hours and meet the accounting requirements in the state where you want to sit for the CPA exam, then they would probably give you an internship your junior year, and then you would go out and work for them after you graduate. And typically, firms are starting you in September, generally is when they'll start you. Some firms, depending on the city, may start you sooner than that. So you still have some time to sit for the CPA exam. I've heard that more firms are starting them a little bit earlier. During the financial crisis, firms were starting students later, but now as they've got more work, they're starting people sooner. But generally, students will start in September. except for like the MSA students that graduate in December. They're usually starting in January right away during busy season. Turnover in accounting, it relates to the progression. Turnover in accounting is lower than it was when I worked in public accounting. That's 30 years ago. Because of automation, they just don't hire as many people initially, and so they try to make sure they keep them as much as possible. So about half the people that start in public accounting are still with them like 5 years later, which is better than most jobs, really. I think people turn over in jobs quite a bit now, but public accounting used to have a much higher turnover rate than that, and it's lowered. Yeah. The question, I'll repeat the question. The question was, what if you got the 150 hours after 4 years, should you get the master's degree? That's kind of it. And I think it kind of depends on what you feel like. If you think you just want to work for a couple of years and then maybe get an MBA or do something else, then maybe you want to go out and work right away. If you aren't able to get the jobs that you want, maybe the employers aren't looking at you the way you think they should, then sometimes you stay for the extra year in order to interview again, and then also to demonstrate that you're doing well in the master's program and you've got a better grasp now of the material than you did as an undergrad. And it could be just on your side, you just don't feel like you're ready. Even though you could go, you feel like that you want to get a better understanding of how things fit together. Or especially if like you're in tax or you want to do more on consulting side, it might be worth your while to stay just to get the job that you want to go after. So it's really kind of a personal decision. I guess the other thing too is if the football team's good and you want one more season around, then that's another reason to stay. But one last thing, and then I'll answer your question. The other thing that a lot of people could graduate in December and then start in January. And so if you go that route, it really doesn't cost you that much because they would delay you. Most of the time they're going to delay you to start till September anyway. So if you take the master's that first semester of the fifth year and then work in January, you've only lost a couple months worth of work. And our scholarships are very good. Generally, we'll give scholarships that average around 40% of tuition. So that's generally more than what most people are getting as undergrads. So, it's not like you're paying the entire tuition, and there's a range there. I'm sorry, question? Was there a question, Becca? Say it again, I'm sorry. To be a professor or to just be an accountant? Be an accountant, I said that accounting the question is what kind of skills do you need to be an accountant? And so I think if you're good in algebra, that seems to carry through quite a bit in accounting, that there's a logic to it. And then there's different terminology for different things on the income statement or just concepts of wealth and changes in wealth, or like, do you have a pension plan? Do you have a lease? So there's all kinds of different economic activities that we have names for. So that's why I was talking about kind of a foreign language, but then you have to understand how this particular concept relates to another concept. So those are just skills in general. Statistics are becoming more important for all accountants as you think about projecting the future and then also trying to value either businesses or certain types of assets, because there's no market for the assets, so you have to use mathematical models to try to come up with what the value is. And then, like, to be a professor, that's where you would really need the statistics and the math skills come more into play. But I think a lot of people think accounting is high math. It's not like engineering for the most part. It's really, do you have kind of a mathematical mind? And if you did well in algebra, if you did well in calculus in high school, chances are you're going to do well in accounting. But it's not, everything's not black and white, so you've got to feel comfortable with nuanced interpretations. So it's really a combination, I would say, of maybe having part of you is an arts and letters mind, and part of you is kind of an engineering mind, and you have to know when to use which part. You know, if you're strictly an engineering type, I don't think you're a good accountant. And if you're strictly arts and letters type, I don't think you're a good accountant either. I think you need to be able to pull in both sides of your brain to be a good accountant. I mean, creative accounting doesn't mean fraud. A creative accountant means that you can look at a transaction from a variety of viewpoints and come up with the best way of approaching it from an accounting standpoint. Or creative, what's the most efficient way of trying to audit this transaction or these series of transactions. So there's really a lot of creativity in accounting. What's the fastest way that I can communicate the problem we have here to my supervisors? And so, you know, I still work on how to be more concise in my writing. And so accounting, there's a big payoff for people that can write clearly and concisely. And that's a skill that just comes with practice. Yeah. Well, if I say something wrong, I'll let Sam come in. I think that you can overload for a variety of reasons, but they'll always look at what your grade point is and see, does it make sense for you to overload in these circumstances? And then if other people are trying to get into the course just to graduate, then they would take priority over you. So it really kind of depends on the circumstances. Okay, okay. Yeah. It depends on for accounting, all the courses have to be taken here, all the accounting courses. Now, do you honor any business courses taken other places? What about electives? Right, right, right. But we offer quite a few accounting courses during the summer. Like we offer business law, we offer both principal courses. We're offering the finance course now. If we had more demand, we would offer more courses. We've offered tax also. So you can actually get quite a bit in your accounting major done during the summer. Anything else? I think accounting is a great major. I mean, there's just so much you can do from a foundational standpoint. You have all kinds of opportunities. Right?